Welcome to Behind the ABA Talk podcast, where we have heart-to-heart conversations with the ABA experts, thought leaders, and changemakers. Each episode unpacks the stories, insights, and behind-the-scenes realities that shaped our experts' professional journeys. I'm your host, Lisa Gurdin, founder of Gurdin Consulting. So what does it take to bring the science of ABA to a part of the world where it has yet to make an impact? For over 20 years, Dr. Susan Ainsleigh has done exactly that. She built the first BACB-approved course sequence in the Middle East, taught graduate and undergraduate ABA on multiple contents, and worked across settings from early intervention to adult services. In this episode, Dr. Ainsleigh joins us to talk about what it is like to work in a completely different cultural context, train and supervise the next generation of behavior analysts, and finish a multi-day solo hike through the mountains of Portugal. Before we jump in, a quick word from today's sponsor, Therapy Lake. If you run an ABA practice or you're thinking about starting one, you know the pain of juggling 3 or 4 disconnected tools that don't talk to each other. Therapy Lake puts your whole practice in one login, scheduling, data collection, billing, AI tools to help automate tasks, and even manage billing and RCM services if you want extra support with claims and collections. It's a month-to-month with no lock-in, free onboarding and support, and you can try it 2 months free of charge. Book a demo at therapylake.com and mention Behind the ABA Talk podcast to receive promotional pricing. And without further ado, a huge welcome and thank you to Dr. Susan Ainsleigh. I'm so excited to have you as a guest on my podcast.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
I've had the pleasure of working with Susan on the MassABA Board of Directors and presenting a panel on supervision at last year's ABA conference in Portugal. And a few years ago in 2025, Susan did a continuing education presentation with Dr. Hannah Rue and Kim Edwards as part of my continuing education program for BCBAs, which was an amazing event that we have that is now on demand. So you can find Enhancing Supervisory Skills, a supervision panel for BCBAs on Behavior Live for 1.5 CEUs for behavior analysts. And at the end of this particular episode, I will share a special discount code for this event. And it is definitely worth watching and learning from. And I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm so excited to talk with you about all of the things that you have done in your career. So last year, we presented on supervision at the International ABA Conference. And when we parted, you went on a solo hike through Portugal. Can you share what that was like and what kind of the best part of the trip was and the most difficult part?
Okay, yes, certainly. So thank you for having me. It was a fantastic experience presenting with the panel at ABAI in Portugal. Lisbon was stunning, brilliant. We had a wonderful panel, yourself, Hannah, Kim, and myself speaking about supervision. We had really great feedback about that panel. Likewise, as you note, after the conference, I went on a journey that was I guess, a lifelong goal, walking a pilgrimage called the Camino de Santiago. I started in Porto, which is a city a little bit north of Lisbon. Some people that I walked with started in Lisbon, which would have added about a month. And I ended in the city of Santiago. It's a historical pilgrimage, and there are multiple paths of the Santiago throughout Europe. I chose the Portugal one primarily because fate and you brought us to Portugal to present. The total walk that I did was about 175 miles. It took me about 16 days. Yeah, I walked from village to village with pack, just a single small backpack, stayed in small hotels and hostels primarily. It was November, so it was a little cold and rainy. Perhaps the hardest part, or one of the hardest parts to manage, was preparing for the weather. I was very nervous about getting wet in terms of disrupting my equipment, my shoes, my feet. I guess we consider our feet our equipment when we're walking that long. And then somewhere along the line, someone said to me, "You shouldn't worry so much about the rain. Your skin is waterproof." And I honestly realized at that point, perhaps I'm worrying too much about the rain. And people would say along the way, just embrace the rain, embrace the rain. It was challenging at moments because it was cold. There was actually a hurricane while I was there, which caused some flooding and whatnot. So of course the elements was were difficult. It was a physically challenging experience. So those aspects were probably expected and not surprising. But it was very reflective, very peaceful. Really teaches a person to live in the moment and reconsider, I suppose, all the things in your life, all the people in your life. Something that I did each day is, as I first of all, I talk to myself a lot. I walk solo, so
Yes.
I chat to myself. As I was walking along, occasionally each day, a thought would come to me about someone that I had known in my life. And so I started making it a habit of capitalizing on those thoughts. When one came to me, I would spend time just thinking about that person, sort of reflecting on where we met and what our journey was together. I started thinking of it as my person of the day. And so that was really beneficial. I took some notes, but that turned out to be not wasn't something that I have been inclined to go back and reread. Just something that I experienced at the moment.
That sounds amazing. And so much happened, I'm sure, on your
Yeah.
journey. And you must have met really cool people and interesting people
Many
along the
people,
way.
yes.
Yeah.
Many people walking solo um, from all over the world, and people tended to cross paths for a while, and talk or
Yeah.
walk along. It's a very big support of the Camino throughout the trail. So, native people living near the trail and working near the trail would stop and talk and encourage and share, and that was really beneficial. I have a huge fear of getting lost. That was something I learned about myself. I was very nervous about getting lost somewhere in Portugal, right? Um, and the Camino has a component where the trail is marked or the path is marked by yellow arrows that point in the direction that you're supposed to go. And they're very prevalent. It's fairly easy to find them. Sometimes you have to look a little bit, but they're there everywhere. And one day I had this epiphany. I thought, wouldn't it be great if throughout our lives we had yellow arrows to point the way? Go this way, make this decision. And then I walked a little further and I thought, you know what? Really, we do have yellow arrows all along the way, symbolically, of course. But if we pay attention in life, there's generally some kind of signal that says, if you go this way, you're likely to, I guess, as we'd say in ABA, find reinforcement.
Yeah.
And if you go this way, not so much. And so that was really sort of a day where I reflected on getting lost and the path and how that can be really frightening. And yet there are guides throughout life.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes when you get lost, you find something unexpected that
Mm,
changes or enhances your life in some way. And
very true.
when I'm traveling in different cities, I depends on where I am and how safe it is, but I like to kind of wander. I'm like, oh, let's go this
Mm,
way and see what happens. And like I said, you never know,
mm,
what you're gonna find
very true.
along the way. But it sounds like you had a very mindful
Hmm.
trip, and I'm wondering if you've kept some of that awareness, mindfulness, that active thought bubble of reflection once you came in and dropped back into your very busy life, which we are about to talk about.
I think it's very challenging to practice mindfulness on a daily basis. It's certainly something that's written and talked a lot about
Yeah.
in various venues. What I have found is I recognize when I'm not
Mm,
at this point, and and therefore I try to recognize it more and take that opportunity to stop for a minute and regroup.
yes.
I'm certainly not very good at that. Not practicing mindfulness, which is essentially defined by multitasking, which many times professionals pride themselves on
Yes.
being able to do multitask. But it is really the enemy of being mindful.
Right, right. That's why I love doing things like the podcast and presenting and doing trainings because for me, those I'm in it. I'm not thinking about other
Mm,
things. I'm not planning anything else. I'm in
mm,
it fully, and I love that about that part of my work. But if you could right now take us through your career journey, you have done so much during your career, and I know everybody would love to hear kind of how you know, how you moved through all of the things.
sure. Sure. So I graduated from undergrad university in 1987. My undergrad degree is in biology.
Nice.
I had no plan other than go to college. I was the first woman in my family, direct family, to graduate from an undergraduate
Yes.
bachelor's degree in yeah. So I had a plan to go to college and pursue a career. I didn't really have a plan of what that career would be. I thought maybe I'd be a doctor, maybe I'd be a teacher, maybe I'd help people. Um, and hopefully some of that has manifested. After university, I actually went to work in a hospital lab, a data analytic type position. Um, I actually utilized my first PC in that position. It was a really, really big,
Yes.
gigantic
Yep.
box with lots of code. And I spent a lot of time entering data, gathering data from physicians and other practitioners. Um, and we had a great team. There were certainly moments where I learned a lot, but frankly, I was bored.
Mm.
Um, and I found myself, oh, I won't say taking naps, but getting drifty every day. And I was living with a high school friend in a neighboring town, and she said to me, "You should stop this. You should be around people." And I thought about that for a while, and I started looking for a job. And there was a residential program right down the street from where I lived, advertising for teacher positions. I wasn't a teacher at the time, but teacher non-certified. It was a residential program in Massachusetts. Um, and so I quit my job and went to work for this residential program. I had terrible hours and I worked a lot of overtime hours and found my purpose, I guess. Um, while I was there, I got a master's degree, um, and eventually found my way to the practice of behavior analysis. It wasn't a typical path as we might think about it today, but I don't think in the 80s there was a typical path to
I don't think so.
behavior analysis. There wasn't an easy way or a known way to get a degree in behavior analysis. Mine was in severe special education. And then I took a job as a clinical director in an adult service program in Central Mass. And then from there, I became a supervisor for a home-based home services ABA program. I guess today it would be more typically known as an insurance-funded um, ABA program. There wasn't insurance funding at that time.
Oh,
Um, and from there, I took a director position in an early intervention program, which actually was quite pivotal. Probably the first time I really worked with, not just with, but for, and primarily surrounded by people from other disciplines. That that was a bit of a wake up call, shall we say, helped me get out of my bubble, and really understand what what our purpose was in terms of providing services and how it fit with people from other disciplines. Um, and while I was doing that, I started teaching part time at Simmons.
mm,
It was Simmons College then, now Simmons University. And I taught there for about a decade, I'd say. Yeah, so that was my early career, probably the first 15 years or so. Really intensive.
yeah.
Um, really, I was blessed in how much I was taught and how much I was able to learn and how many opportunities I was given very quickly, um, and very intensively. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that at some point you ended up in the Middle East
Mm,
and you were really one of the first or the first clinicians, behavior analysts to bring ABA to the Middle East. Um, and I mean, can you talk about what that was like to bring ABA, to this completely different culture, um, to practice in a way that was culturally responsive, where it's just completely different over there? Can you talk about that experience and what you learned from that, which I'm sure was so much.
mm. So, how I got to the Middle East is as follows. While I was at Simmons, a representative from an organization in the Middle East called JISH, which stands for Jeddah Institute of Speech and Hearing.
Mm,
It's a private organization in the city of Jeddah, which is on the coast of Saudi Arabia. Um, and the director who came, whose name was Sultana Alariza, um, was looking for someone who would come to Jeddah for a period of time and do some training. It was a speech and hearing organization, but they were increasingly serving more and more children with autism or autism spectrum disorders or behavior challenges, and finding it really challenging to help those individuals receive effective speech and hearing
yeah.
intervention. And parents there were advocating for behavior analytics services for their children. Um, and Sultana Alariza is a doer. She,
Mm,
I did not bring ABA there. She brought me there,
mm,
and I spent a month there. My first time, that was in 2007, working with doing some basic professional development and working with speech and hearing professionals. Um, and that was very, very, very beneficial, very, very exciting, very, very meaningful. But when I left, reportedly the professionals there said that was good, but not enough. Well, we need more than professional development to be able to incorporate this type of intervention into our day-to-day practice. And there were some brief conversations about starting some type of partnership program between the university and the clinic. They kind of faded.
mm,
Um, And then about a year later, I was asked to attend a reception at Simmons because they were hosting some professionals from Jeddah, not from Jish, as it turned out, from a university there called Darul Hekma, which stands for House of Knowledge, by the way, which Darul Hekma was. I went to the reception, and there was a faculty there named Mervat Tashkandi, who approached me and introduced herself. And I acknowledged that I had been in Jeddah before and I really loved it. And I wished I could come back. And she said, "Fantastic. Would you like a job?" I mean, that was the
Yeah.
short version of the
Sure, sure, sure,
conversation.
sure.
But that's pretty much how it went. I left. I did not say yes. I left the reception, but I could not escape that thought. And probably a month later, I received an offer. It happened to be while I was at an ABAI conference
Yeah.
in Chicago. And I decided to say yes. And approximately a year later, I moved over there and went to work as a faculty at this university. And I had a great experience in my career prior to going there, but I truly believe I became a behavior analyst working in Jeddah, primarily because I was on my own. I
Yeah.
was not surrounded by peers. Um, in ABA, I was surrounded by many peers. Um, I didn't really know anyone who had done anything like that before. So
Wow, that's
I
such a
had to
bold move,
I
Susan.
had to figure it out, basically.
Wow,
I
that
was
is,
teaching undergrad students. I'd never taught undergrad students. Um, the first class I taught was Introduction to ABA. Had never taught Introduction to ABA. And while you might think that approaching a course like that is pretty straightforward and simple, it is actually pretty magical to watch students who don't know what a behavioral principle is
mhm,
to be able to recite and describe what a behavioral principle is. Actually really means you have to understand what a behavioral
right,
principle is.
right.
And so I learned a lot in that experience just about the science of ABA. Well, when I arrived, they actually did not have an ABA program. They had an autism program embedded in a special education degree, and there was a director of it. She left about a month after I got there, and so they asked me to be the director, and I said yes. And little hint for people who are wondering about how to move your career in new directions: say yes when
Yeah.
people ask you to do big things. Um,
I can
at
see,
that point, yeah,
sorry, no, I
I,
can just see all these, all these forks in the road for you
mm,
where the
mm,
yellow arrow,
the yellow arrows
there's a
go this
yellow
way.
arrow, and you were bold enough, brave enough, confident enough to say yes and to go on that path where you really, did so much and just created this incredible, meaningful path for yourself while
Mm,
you were paying attention to those yellow signs and saying
mm,
yes. And that's such a good reminder for all of us to pay attention and to not let our fears or, our worries prevent us from doing something
mm,
that we're not that comfortable with yet. That we're not maybe fully prepared for yet. And, having
mm,
that confidence to say, well, I can do that. I'll figure that out.
mm,
So that's incredible,
mm.
Susan, and really
There
so.
was there was a group of behavior analysts from ABAI who had visited
Uh-huh.
Saudi Arabia before me, and I found them online. I recall sitting in the airport waiting to fly over there, emailing them,
Yeah.
saying one of them saying, "I'm on my way to Saudi Arabia. I'm not really sure what's going to happen, in the
Yeah.
professional." aspect when I get there. So I made some contacts there about from professionals who had done some work outside of the United States. Neil Martin was instrumental in just encouraging me.
Yeah.
I decided at that point to build a verified course sequence. That was really not my plan when I went there, but I did it.
Yes.
And then I realized there's no location for individuals to um, accrue fieldwork hours. Um, and so having this contact with Jish from the previous year, I worked with them to set up, it was referred to as a division at that point, a division of service where children could come and receive ABA services. It was as you might expect. Children went upstairs to get ABA and downstairs to get speech. And that was a big lesson, is how to get the people from upstairs to go downstairs and downstairs to go upstairs.
Yes.
And I don't mean the clients.
Yes. Yes. Well, I keep
Mm,
thinking about collaboration.
mm,
I told you before we started the podcast, I was at WEBA conference last week talking with a lot of BCBAs and speech therapists who are also BCBAs, just talking, and we presented on collaboration.
mm,
And just hearing you talk about that collaboration, back then, and how we're still working on that in that space, particularly with speech and ABA. But hearing your early experiences with that and sort of noticing, this is very siloed, this is very separate. We need to do
mm,
something about this. Um, it's really cool to hear about, and that you were able to know to realize this,
mm,
and then do something about it.
mm. Yes, that was among the bigger challenges for me.
Yeah.
Um, the opportunity was so present right in front of me. And I was so excited about what I was doing all the time. That was one of the great parts of the experience was every day I loved what I was doing there, working with the families and the children and the staff that I was hiring and watching them actually discover ABA, because no one there was familiar with behavior analytic practice. Um, but I was anxious for things to go fast. I wanted everyone to just embrace things right now.
Yes.
I could
Yesterday.
not understand why having someone storm in and say, "This is the way we should change this and do things," and I could not understand why that might be challenging for everyone. And so I'm sure that um, from a collaborative perspective, I made a lot of blunders, shall we say. But there were great experiences there. There were people that came upstairs and said, "Please come downstairs." There were people that came upstairs and never left.
Yes.
There
Yes.
were, to be symbolic, there were just wonderful collaborations and, complete messes
Yes.
at the same time. But each one really introduced me to someone new, someone's new perspective. Um, allowed me to watch people really make connections, um, and um, and just taught me a lot every moment along the way. People often ask, like, how was it? How was the experience in terms of bringing or delivering services? How was it different? And here's the big surprise: it wasn't all that
Oh,
different. The interesting part for me was how much we all had in common. You know, parents all over the world want their children to succeed
yes.
everywhere, in many of the same ways, at least conceptually. Um, and once you embrace that, the other stuff, how you can communicate with someone who isn't speaking your language, or how you can build a program around goals that are a little bit different than you might conceptualize. Those are just they're not barriers. They're just details you have to work
Yes.
out. And it was always surprising to me how similar um, we were. The practice really is the practice, and if you think about it at its core, and the intention of it to be individualized to a situation, of course it would be individualized in this situation as much as anywhere.
Right. It's just
Mm.
the variables that you have to consider in our shift, and
Different,
particularly
right?
right when you are practicing in another country in particular, in another cultural
Hmm.
context, those are variables that, like you
Hmm.
said, they're not barriers, they're variables to problem solve. And I always,
Hmm.
tell my kids when they're, upset about something that happened, or pushing back about something, getting all flustered with a problem, I was like, that's a problem to solve, not a
Hmm.
problem to worry about. Like,
Hmm.
let's solve that, let's talk about that, let's figure that out, with openness, and a sense of flexibility, which it sounds like that situation, I would think, required from you, and to learn
Yeah.
along the way, well, that didn't work, so I'm gonna try it this way.
Hmm.
A lot of trial and error, I
Very
would think.
true. Yeah, very true. Very true. I think that is as you're practicing an ABA, that is a standard part of practice.
Yeah.
You try to learn and let the experience of others and the guidance of research help you make decisions proactively so that you're not completely relying on trial and error. Um, and even with your best efforts, some things don't work. And remaining open to the fact that this didn't work, or I didn't really approach that in the best way that I should, or um, my idea about this, perhaps is right to me, but if I
Yes.
push this, nothing good's going to happen, and I'm not going to solve the problem I really need to solve. So there were definitely many moments like that, and I was dramatically homesick all the time,
Oh, oh, really?
which was really a surprise to me. I missed many things, and so I constantly had to combat that of
Yeah.
being homesick a lot. Mm,
I would bet. I would think you would need to
mm,
really be in the moment to
mm,
be able to say, okay, that's over here. I'm gonna focus on my
mm-hmm,
work that I love so much and be excited about. And
mm-hmm. I think one can be both at the same
yeah,
time, and I certainly was
yeah,
was often both at the same time. Coming home was just an extraordinary event.
yeah,
And of course, over those 7 years, I spent a lot of time going back and forth between that part of the world and this part of the world, flying, sitting in airports, and
yes,
that type of thing.
yes. Amazing. So since then, you've really spent kind of this maybe second half of your career, maybe,
Mm,
in academia.
mm-hmm,
Um, Tell me about that. Do you like, have you enjoyed that? What has been,
mm-hmm,
I mean, it sounds like, you've been in academia almost your whole career, but you've really focused on it. And as director of the
mm,
ABA program at Bay Path University for many years.
mm-hmm,
Um, what has that been like? What have been kind of, again, the good parts, the not good parts of that
mm.
experience, and where you are still today?
I would probably say that the pattern continued. I didn't really choose academia.
Ah, okay.
Academia kind of chose me and
Yeah.
drew me in. I was asked to teach part time at Simmons before I went to Saudi Arabia, and I had been doing that for a while. Um, when I transitioned back from working in the Middle East, I had been doing some work for Bay Path University for my almost my original boss in higher education. Well, truly my original boss in higher education, Dr. Liz Fleming. She encouraged me to come and work at BayPath. Um, I didn't have a plan for when I returned, really, so I said yes.
Mm-hmm.
And Well, when I came to BayPath, um, I wasn't sure that's where I was going to stay. I wasn't sure that I wanted to be in higher education full time. I met the president of BayPath, Dr. Carol Leary, at the time, who was exceptionally inspirational, and we started building a program, which began in 2011. Um, it was very small. It grew large pretty quickly. I had a lot of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Probably about half of them have come to fruition. The other half, still in process, or I've discarded for different ideas. But in truth, um, at some point along the path of traveling a career, you realize that your career will end, and the greatest purpose you can embrace in life is to prepare the next
Yes.
generation of people who are going to step in and lead what you see as your career. In fact, I've come to realize that not doing that, um, not necessarily for any individual, but not doing that as a profession is pretty detrimental to the profession.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that is what I have committed myself to by staying in higher education. For a while, I worked in higher education and practiced clinically. And then that became a little difficult. So I shifted to focusing on higher education, primarily at the graduate level, with a huge focus on um, strengthening supervision of future practitioners and clinicians and behavior analysts.
Yes. And I also, through my teaching and CE program and all of those things, feel very strongly about preparing the next generation to work in today's world, which is not the same than when you started, when I started
Mm-hmm,
decades ago.
mm-hmm,
And that is, I think, one of the most fulfilling parts for me too, is imparting that
mm-hmm,
information and talking through it and learning from my students. I feel like
mm-hmm,
I learn so much with every conversation that I have. So I find that fulfilling as well. So
mm-hmm,
let's talk about supervision.
mm-hmm,
Supervision in ABA has certainly evolved over the years. When it first became a
mm-hmm,
requirement, someone just basically signed their name on a piece of paper, and you were all good. And now is way more standards, requirements, many hours. Um, when you look at that evolution, what do you think has improved? What do you think hasn't? Where's the work that needs to be done in
mm-hmm.
that context?
I think that the expectations of supervisors in ABA has evolved, in my opinion,
Hmm.
not fast enough, but
Right.
it has evolved. I was pretty fortunate in starting in higher education and supervision at Simmons, in that the expectation there was that supervision was never going to be about um, sort of a formality. There was always a curricula, there was always a plan, there were always evaluation and training of supervisors. There was always a process. It was difficult because there weren't a lot of models to to there wasn't a lot of guidance.
Right.
Um, I have um, I have always valued the leadership of the Behavior Analyst Certification Board in that area, in that they were the first to provide some guidance, not 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 across all disciplines, but in the discipline of ABA, and that is necessary. Somebody
Mhm.
has to lead the way. Um, and what I have seen evolved is more people, more organizations, more supervisors embracing the idea of doing better, um, embracing the standards of being more effective,
Mhm.
um, and uh, taking supervision more formally and more seriously. And the requirements and the standards have increased progressively as the past 2 decades or 3 decades have um, gone by.
Sure. So where,
So that's good.
yeah. And yet there's still a lot of variability out there. Um,
Hmm.
Practice of supervision. Where do you see us heading next with supervision? What do we need to do to elevate that practice even more, and sort of have more consistency in the field?
Hmm. When I feel discouraged about supervision and the practices that occur in supervision, it's typically because of witnessing people not prioritizing supervision. My view of supervision as a person in higher education is generally through the eyes of the student, and and through the work with the dyad of the student and the supervisor. And it is really all too common that people don't have time, or they don't perceive themselves as having time to supervise well. Organizations don't always prioritize the time and the resources necessary for a clinician to supervise well. It's still fairly common for people to try to wing it and supervise based on simply what's happening in the moment without a plan, or simply based on their experience of or their journey when they were supervised. And all of those are critical components. But the reality is people are encouraged into supervisory positions pretty early in their career, and so they don't have to
Right.
um, as much experience to bring to the process, and as much resources, a large network of people who can guide them because they're newer to the field. And I think that as a field, we need to understand the implications of that for our field. If supervisors determine, in part at least, the competence of the next generation, then what they do is really significant.
Yes.
And what they don't do or aren't able to do or aren't given the resource, for whatever reason, it doesn't occur. And there are many reasons it doesn't occur. Um, it's not just that isolated situation that experiences those negative outcomes. It's really the field in general that experiences those
Yes.
negative outcomes. So it's got to be a priority in every situation.
Yes, I totally agree. And if you're making that a priority, that means you have to carve out time and space for it.
Mm,
You can't
mm,
just add, it can't be an add on to
mm,
an already overflowing plate,
mm,
because something is gonna give.
mhm,
And so if you are committing to supervising at the highest level, right, and taking on that big responsibility very seriously, you have to make room on your plate,
mhm,
and significant room, because it matters so much.
mm. There's been a very recent focus on teaching behavior analysts to be more reflective about appropriate supervisory volume,
Yes,
and analyzing their own capabilities and workloads and making good decisions about what to say yes to,
yes,
and um, and what to say yes to under the right circumstances, and what to say not yet to. And I think that's great,
yes,
a great skill for a person advancing in their field.
Yes, and I think that's a really important point for mentors
Mm-hmm.
as well to help,
Mm-hmm.
newer behavior analysts to think through all of that and to look at those variables when saying yes or saying not yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really important point. So we talked on our panel about kind of this idea of positive supervision and creating meaningful supervisory experiences. What what does that look like to you in your experience and what you've seen with your supervisors at
Mm-hmm.
BayPath in particular?
So I work with probably about 100 different supervisors of field work at BayPath, across twice as many students.
Sure.
And there really is no uniform set of circumstances that every dyad succeeds in. But there are a few patterns. Things don't go well if the relationship between the student and the supervisor is problematic, or too problematic. Um, Things don't go well if there's not a plan. Um, if people aren't clear about what we're supposed to be doing, what our goals are, and what are the processes we're supposed to be following, in order to achieve those goals. People um, need people generally want and need a network to problem solve with, to troubleshoot with, in a private, confidential way. Um, it it is not a personal relationship; it is a professional relationship, but it can feel and have personal implications, as you experience it. And so, understanding how to manage them, um, the challenges and the conflicts and the disagreements, the difficult conversations is pretty important, and really setting the stage for that to be able to occur. Every supervisory student relationship begins when you're less familiar with each other,
Right.
when you're new to the plan, when you're not sure about what the experience is going to be like from both perspectives. And having time and tools and resources to begin that in a positive way is really, really important.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of supervision is done remotely in that
Hmm.
virtual space. So that adds
Hmm.
another layer of challenge, right? Is to be
Hmm.
able to create that relationship, problem solve, deal with conflict in the virtual space. And that's not the same. I mean, we're all kind of used to it at this point, I think, but it's another variable,
Hmm.
I think.
Certainly. I think that it has afforded people more access to one another.
Yes.
There's more opportunity for spontaneous troubleshooting and problem solving. There's more availability of
Yes.
people, and that's an advantage. Continual contact,
Yes.
is advantageous in a supervisory situation. Challenging for the supervisor in a different way, perhaps, um, but less challenging in other ways. So, I think, obviously there are the technological components in terms of skill
Sure.
access and things like that that have to be solved and have to be, working smoothly in order for that type of interaction to occur.
Sure. So, the field work, when we're doing field work, our students are doing that field work. Organizations need to, for that to be really effective, organizations need to support that process and design, prepare, systems that do that, right? For aspiring behavior analysts, for behavior technicians, there has to be some supervisory component there that is driven by the organization in order for it to be really effective. What advice would you give to organizations who are looking to set that up, or looking to improve the systems they already have?
The organizations that I've worked with that have done so most effectively incorporate providing, including planning and preparing and organizing for supervision as part of the job of the behavior analyst, part of the workload, essentially. Um, they communicate support for effective supervision. They allot time and resources for effective supervision. They provide a space. They provide an appropriate schedule. They provide resources. Um, and students have opportunities for, I suppose we'd call them scaffolded experience, where gradually during their journey they have, broadening opportunities for practice. When that happens, supervision and fieldwork are still challenging, but there are fewer barriers to effective execution of it. Um, on the flip side, I see many places and situations where that is not happening.
Yes.
And sometimes the student is so resourceful and so willing to devote their own time and finance and resources to making it work that it succeeds. And sometimes that is problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
that proactive part, for everybody, to say this is what we need to do, and this is what we need to do it
Mm-hmm.
effectively. And it is that, I think what you mentioned, allotting time and resources, and that is what I've heard from behavior analysts is a barrier to effective supervision, to collaboration, to all of the things that that we need to be doing. And so it's definitely needs to be a value for organizations in order for us to provide that kind of supervisor experience and prepare the next generation. Um, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
talk about your work as executive director of Mass ABA, which is an organization for behavior analysts here in Massachusetts. You were the director for 7 years. We worked together on the board, which was so much fun. So why for you was leading a state professional organization important?
Well, I would slightly reclassify and say that what I did was support the board in leading. Um, Organizations like that are designed to be run in a visionary sense by a group of professionals who have a vision or share the vision that the organization had. And Masaba has had a vision from its inception, and that vision was carried out by a group of really talented behavior analysts who are constantly shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the role of executive director was to be the constant and to make sure that the 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 environment was such that the board could be successful, and that was an honor and a challenge and a lot of fun. Um, and Massachusetts is a great location to be part of the leadership of the behavior analytic community. And so there were a lot of great opportunities there. Um, and that organization has many goals, executes many opportunities for people practicing in the area, lots of professional development opportunities, lots of advocacy opportunities.
Yes.
Becoming involved in an organization like that means, without a doubt, you're going to meet people who share your vision, but you didn't even know them before your work there. It'll mean very likely you get involved in an initiative that you don't have a lot of experience with, which is really beneficial. Um, and it will mean you continue to learn how important it is to value the the, the profession and to assure that your actions strengthen the profession. So that's what it did for me all the time. I
Yes.
was I was very pleased that I took that opportunity. I was recruited to Masaba by an individual that I had worked for previously, um, and got to know many individuals and their successes
Yes.
through that work.
Yes, I have
I
really.
encourage everyone from Massachusetts to become involved with Masaba.
Yes, I have really enjoyed it, and you know, I think mostly the opportunity to meet so many behavior analysts
Mm-hmm.
across the state and hearing about all the things that they're doing, I find so inspirational, so interesting, and it really allows you to give back to the field and you know to help move it along, like you said, with other like-minded behavior analysts. Um, so, what do you want the next generation of behavior analysts to know or to do?
Um, I think that we are blessed by the existence of the motivation, by the intensive motivation and spirit and commitment of the next generation. And I happen to be in a position where I see that firsthand all the time. Um, just like when we were entering the field, when people first are exposed to behavior analytic communities or practice, they often find their purpose right away, and that's really great. Um, I think that making sure that you you commit yourself to learning, to bettering your practice, to evaluating your practice, to becoming involved in initiatives that strengthen the field as well as your own opportunities, to be open to learning uh, learning something that feels a little different than what you learned or what you strongly believed in, previously. I think all of those, just to being a lifelong learner, I think is a great asset in a professional discipline.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, lastly, what gives you hope for the future of behavior analysis?
Well, um,
Big
you know,
question. Big question.
um, hope is important, and any um, any venue where humans have to persevere is easier when hope pervades.
Yes.
Um, I think the next generation uh, carries vision and goals just as we did, and understanding that is a great asset to knowing that things will move forward in challenging but beneficial ways. Um, Human behavior is a constant, and understanding it will always be a motivator for people who experience it and are influenced by it. And so um, it's hard not to have hope when the discipline you've chosen is so relative to your own existence and experience. What could be better? What could be a more interesting, exciting area to learn about and practice than that which you experience every day? And so if you understand your discipline, you don't have to look hard for hope. Hope is all around us.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so appreciative that you took the time to talk with me on this episode of Behind the ABA Talk. So thank you so much. I learned so much from you
Mm.
and all of our experiences together. And I look
Mm-hmm.
forward to for doing more, talking more, experiencing more all across the world, Susan. We have to figure out where we're going next. I mean, there's so many places to do, so
It's a
many things.
beautiful world.
It's a beautiful world, and it's a beautiful world. And you have today shared your incredible breadth of experience in the field and your insight for building positive supervisory systems that prepare the next generation of BCBAs to practice with both competence and cultural responsiveness, with humility, with a sense of collaboration and responsibility. I want to thank Therapy Lake for being today's episode sponsor. Be sure to book a demo at therapylake.com and mention behind the ABA Talk podcast to receive promotional pricing. And also be sure to click the link in the podcast episode description to listen to Dr. Ainsleigh's on-demand CE with Dr. Hannah Rue and Kim Edwards, Enhancing Supervisory Skills, a supervision panel for BCBAs. And you can use promo code capital S, capital A dash podcast for 50% off of that CE event. I really encourage all of you to go ahead and take a listen and learn from Susan and her incredible panel as well. Thanks again for being here, Dr. Ainsleigh.
Wonderful to see you.
And a special thank you to my podcast producer, Cole Asher Hoffman.